Welcome. You're listening or watching to Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. And today I'm joined by two special guests, but you know what? I'm not going to say their name because you're going to have to wait until I introduce them. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you'll know right now who they are. But if you're only listening to us on your phone or in your car, you have no idea who's here. Anyway, I am joined by two great guests today, but before I bring them on to talk about a very interesting and poignant discussion for me currently, we'll get into that, I want to make sure to let you all know about the stuff that Whistlekick does. Because obviously we have this podcast, which has its own website, whistlekickmartialartsradio.com, where you can find show notes on every single episode we've done. This episode is going to be episode 989. We're coming up on 1,000 episodes. And every single one of those episodes has its own page at whistlekickmartialartsradio.com, where you can find show notes, you can find transcripts, you can find photos, all sorts of stuff that you might want to find out about all of our guests and all of our episodes. But the podcast is one small part of what we do. We also, at whistlekick.com, have a myriad of things that we do. I love that word, myriad. Mm-hmm. You can go to whistlekick.com and find things to purchase, whether it's apparel, whether it's books. Our book division is constantly growing. Whether you want to purchase a training program, maybe you want to join, maybe you're a school owner and you want to join Whistlekick Alliance and become part of that program. Maybe you want to attend one of our events that we host throughout the country. We would certainly love to see you there. And lastly, don't forget to please like us on Facebook on our Martial Arts Radio page. Go to YouTube. Even if you're listening to this, go to YouTube. Hit subscribe. Like us on YouTube. Get notifications. All of those things make a big difference. And please consider following us on Patreon. Patreon.com/whistlekick. We really appreciate any donation that you can give to us, even $5 a month. $5, that's like a cup of coffee at Starbucks at this point. So Jeremy and I and all of the Whistlekick staff would love for you to buy us a cup of coffee once a month and help us to connect, educate, and entertain traditional martial artists of the world. Okay, so today's episode, we are going to discuss injury recovery for aging martial artists. Wow. And so I'm joined by Nick Tabor, who, if I'm remembering correctly, is younger than I am. Nick, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, man.
So we figured if we're going to do an episode on aging martial artists recovering, I kind of needed to bring on Mark Warner. Nice to see you, Mark.
Well, I thank you. I'm not quite sure with the intro. But yes, it's wonderful being here with you guys again. And I will give whatever input I can to this conversation. Aging martial artist. Executive martial artist.
Executive, or the senior division.
There you go. I like that.
Although I have to be careful how I use that word because I'm 49, and in Keene they have a senior center that you have to be 50 to go to. So I'm like, next year I can go to the senior center. So
there you go. You're all set. AARP right around the corner, dude.
So Nick, you first brought this episode topic up, which I love. And we, we'll definitely talk about, how it is a little different for aging martial artists and right. Not quote younger, not aging martial artists, but injury recovery in general is something that almost without fail, everyone involved in martial arts is at some point gonna get injured.
Multiple times. Yeah. Hopefully on the low side, but multiple times. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I'm not saying that injury will necessarily even happen at your school. It's just in general, right. People get injured. Accidents happen.
Right.
And what are our options, Nick? Like, if we get hurt, what are our options?
Well, and then, obviously you would want to go to the doctor to check and see how things are, of course. And then, back when I started, it was just, all right, you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. And okay, go sit over there for a little while and then deal it later. But I mean, I think the topic that, I was the one thinking about this, like this was a good idea because, I have a pretty, like you guys, I have a pretty long span career in martial arts right now over a couple of decades. And, I can remember very vividly hurting myself and then literally walking it off. And right now I'm dealing with a shoulder injury. And now it's just like, oh gosh, this isn't getting worse, but this isn't getting better. And I'm thinking now, and like my dad always said, jokingly, and like I realize more and more he's right. But when you turn 40 years old, the check engine light comes on, and that was always a joke. And I'm like, dang, he was right about that. He was right. But the thing is, like, biologically, as you get older, you think of it, and I hate to like use this analogy, but it's the only way I describe it, is people, like, you think of cars. You first get a brand new car, you're driving around, everything's fine, but suddenly, years down the road, you might have to have a hose fixed, change the tires, or something might not work right. Or it may something might not be 100%, but it's still workable. But if something happens, it has to be serviced, and like us, as we get older, our muscles lose their elasticity. Therefore, what happens is as we recover, and that's just one example, when something gets hurt, we might not recover the same way we used to. As opposed to if it's something like the most common thing is, we have, like right now, I have a rotator cuff issue. So I'm like, oh, what happened here? Oh yeah, I did that, and regardless of what happened, like, oh, there's a little bruising inside there now. Well, that didn't happen before. It probably did, but that's a new injury as opposed to injuries that happen multiple times. The body doesn't recover as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's an important distinction to keep in mind. Now, Nick, you said your dad said when you turn 40, your body's check engine light comes on. So, right. Mark, when you turned 40, did they have check engine lights?
No, we were still riding the horses on the wagons. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeehaw.
Now, can I mean, obviously, Mark, we're joking, we're kidding, but you are older than Nick and I.
Yes.
And when we were all younger, our bodies just naturally heal quicker, right?
Right.
Our bodies do react differently when we're older. Can you talk a little bit about some of the issues that you may have had? And I don't even mean now, maybe from when you were younger than to today, just a little bit of that difference there.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned when I was younger, because this is something we want to think about. We always want to take all our injuries seriously. And this goes out to the younger people. One of the reasons I limp so much is because when I was 17, I'm 66 now. When I was 17, I jumped out of a house and fell wrong on my leg and snapped a little bone. It was fine. I joined the military. I was in the infantry, marching around for a couple of years. It was fine till I hit about 50. Then I'm like, oh, what's going on here? Ow, oh, ow, ow. So it does, at the younger stages of your life, keep up with it. Now, personally, what I do now, one of the things I do now is I actually see a traditional Chinese medicine specialist, acupuncturist. His name is Ron Williams, fantastic guy. It's kind of like a PMCS, they call it in the service. Preventive maintenance security checks. Service checks, excuse me. I do that once a week. I listen to what he says, and he gives me feedback on how to keep this classic antique running perfectly. Now, it does take longer for things to get better. Mm-hmm. My leg I had a tight muscle on my leg. I didn't know what to do for the longest time. I happened to dig this out. It's a heating pad, but it's also a massage pad. Mm-hmm. I got that on the leg, and that's moving better now. So pretty soon you'll see me doing jump spin and hook kicks. Well, maybe not.
So, obviously, we are talking about, things that we're still active, we're still moving around. Like, it's
Right.
not necessarily debilitating, but I do want to discuss, and we have done a full episode on this, but I think it's an important thing to bring up again, which is, what if we have a seriously debilitating injury? And I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm 49 years old. Back in August, I slipped. I slipped and fell. I wasn't at the dojo. I wasn't in a sparring match. That would have been a way cooler story than wearing flip-flops that were wet and stepping on smooth concrete, and just my feet came out from underneath me. And I clearly had to have tried to catch myself with my feet, as I'm scrambling, and I fell hard and sprained my ankle really, really badly. So this happened in August. We're recording this on January 1st. Happy New Year. So we're talking August, September, October, November, December. We're talking 4.5 months. It still is not better. And I did go to the doctors, and they did an x-ray and they did an MRI. And the reality is, I need surgery. I'm going to have to be off my foot 0% weight bearing for 4 to 6 months after my surgery. So I have two options, really. One, I can sit at home and not do any martial arts at all. I can't even drive, because I can't use my right foot to push a pedal. Okay. So I've got two options. I can do nothing, or I can still train the upper half of my body, which includes my brain. So I want to talk a little bit about that, because, again, most of us in martial arts will at some point have an injury that we won't be able to go to the dojo, and we still want to be able to train. So, Mark, any thoughts on what I should do? What should I do? I'm not going to be able to go anywhere. I'm going to be stuck at home for 4 to 6 weeks, if not longer, after my surgery.
What do you want to do? That's the only question. The answer is, do you want to move? You have an ankle that you cannot use.
Mm-hmm.
We put that in a basket or something and put it over here. Now, what do we have left? Oh, good. I got hands, got brains, got eyes. We have everything else. In fact, I'll put that leg out. I might tie it down, actually, so I don't use it at all. But my other foot, my left foot, I can still kick with that foot all over the place. So I might be in a wheelchair, going around doing everything in the wheelchair, moving that way. I probably would tie the injured leg down, because you'd want to try and use it. But I actually had a student once, and he had a rotator cuff, was it? And it wasn't too bad. It wasn't really bad. But he knew if he used it, it would get worse.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever he came in, he put it right in the sling. He wouldn't use it. Wouldn't use it at all. He'd take the sling off when he left, so then he could use it again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would think of. I had a friend who said, doesn't matter where, if he's laid in bed like this, he's still going to be working his stuff like that. So we're not going to stop.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing something. Thing that we have to do is we have to be smart when we do it. If we want to keep that leg immobilized, like I said, you might want to tie it down, just so you can be a little smart, so you can be smarter than me. I'll put it that way.
Nick, how about you? Any thoughts on things? I mean, I have a few as well that I'm already planning on doing, but I wanted to see if maybe you guys would give me some inspiration.
Well, one thing I'm going to say, like, you guys know me well. I suffer from cerebral palsy. I got an arm that doesn't work some days,
Sure.
And, with that being said, I want to echo some of the things Mark said. There are so many things that a martial artist could do without one appendage. And I'm not joking about myself at this point. I'm being really serious. And, when you think of it, like, you could be able, and I agree, probably tying the leg down might be a good idea. And I have a good friend out of Las Vegas who he's wheelchair bound and he does Kempo. And, he has to obviously do some modifications and some things, but he's still doing it. You could still work your arms and still work your brain. I'm going to do a plug. I'm surprised, Mark, you didn't say this, but you could write some articles for Martial Journal. And, and, and other stuff that could still occupy your time. And I mean, when you think about it, what does the word martial really mean? When you think of it, it's martial arts is fighting and style of arts. Well, sometimes you might not be able to, you might do something and you might be in an actual altercation and something might be pinned down. So, hey, here's your chance to practice. If my right arm is pinned down, okay, what do I do? How do I do that? Think about other things. I have those days if I can't do it. Well, what can I do? If my arm's really bad today, I'm going to try to work my legs as much as possible and still practice. Or maybe I could try to grab some weapons and stuff like that. And I think the thing that I would say in that respect is, all right, I've gone this far right now. Now that I've had this and people behind me who have been in the arts, I mean, these arts have been around for thousands of years, have had other problems and other issues. Well, how can I take myself a little further with this issue? Or what can I, and always, as I've always told people, a good teacher, a good sensei, tashi, or whatever you want to hold that title for yourself, is always a perpetual student.
Absolutely. Sure.
So
yeah.
What can I, so the question is, what can I learn from this? And what can you do? Because there's going to be someone down the road, and I know you, Andrew, there's going to be someone down the road who's probably in the same situation you're teaching 5, 6, 10 years down the road. So, yeah, I've done that. Let me show you what I can do.
Yeah. So some takeaways that I took from you guys, Mark mentioned the wheelchair. Like, we have had guests on the show that are wheelchair bound. Episode 918, we had Guro Carlito Bonjok.
Yep.
He was on. He's in a wheelchair, and he still is actively teaching seminars all over.
He's
he is phenomenal, right? So everything you've said are great ideas, and they're things I've thought of. Except the writing for Martial Journal, I am not a writer. Yeah, not going to happen. Sorry, Mark. For those that don't know, Mark is the editor-in-chief for Martial Journal. So if you are interested in writing, you should reach out to Mark. But not training, to me, is not an option. Right? 4 to 6 weeks of not going to the dojo, that doesn't mean I can't train.
Right.
So here's an example of some of the training that I will be and have already started doing. And I'll tell you what, guys, it is a lot harder than you might think. I have started verbally saying all the moves of my kata.
Nice.
As an example, the first 6 moves of, there's a form in the style of Shorin-ryu that I have been trained in called Fukigatsu ni. It's from Goju-ryu karate. They would call it Gekisai Daiichi. It's the same form. And so I am I have worked myself to be able to say, Fukigatsu ni goes like this. Small step forward with the right foot, pivot to the left with a left rising block, step forward into a short forward walking stance, right punch high. Step back with the right foot, low down block with the left, to the left. Pivot ahead, slide the left foot up towards the right foot forward in walking stance, right rising block, step forward, left rising punch, in a short walking stance, step back, low, shikodachi with a right low block looking to the right. Now, that's just the first 6 moves. It's really hard to do that and not use your hands, right? Now, I will have access to my hands, right? I will be able to sit in my wheelie chair. Those of you that are watching on YouTube can watch me do this. I'm only going to be booted from the ankle. My knee I'll be able to use. So I'll be able to put my knee up here, and I can still do my forms like this. right? I'll still be able to utilize some movement and still go through my forms, right?
Yeah.
And I have a friend who is going to be coming over once a week, and we're going to go through just me sitting in my wheelie chair. And I'm going to go through and look at modifying all of the bunkai, all of the applications that I do for my forms. Can I do them from a seated position?
Yeah.
The answer is, I don't know, because I've never done it before. But I'm going to use this as an opportunity to see, how would I do it? How can I do it? Nick, you said you have to continue to be a student. That's exactly what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And I hope that people recognize that this is not going to be easy. This is actually mentally is going to be really hard on me because I'm not used to not going to the dojo and training, right? This is just something that I do. And so it's going to be a little hard, but I can't give up. Right. And we all know, Nick, you mentioned you had a friend in Las Vegas who's in a wheelchair. I mentioned Carlito that was on the show. Like, there are people out there that have to do this on an everyday basis, and I only have to do it for 4 to 6 weeks. So why should I give up? So I already have some of those ideas in there. And then reading. Listening to other podcasts. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, Martial Arts Radio is not the only martial arts podcast I listen to.
Really?
Shout out to my good friend Nick Tabor.
Oh,
Real Talk with Sensei Nick. I definitely listen to Nick's podcast.
Yeah, that's great.
So what else, guys? Like, I've talked a lot about what's going on with me, mm-hmm. but have you had other students that you've had in your school that have had maybe not as debilitating as a broken leg or something, but stuff that they have had to change? Mark, you mentioned already one student that you had. Nick, how about yourself?
Yeah, I actually had one that comes to mind when you said not a broken leg. I had one person who he had a concussion. And then what he had to do was then he had to memorize things a little differently. So at that time, what I was doing instead of, and it's actually inspired me a lot, and this was not that long ago, mind you, he got a concussion, and I wrote out all the forms, and I had this in a book, and I had it on my shelf in my office, and I would Xerox the copies of it. It's okay. Work on Yi. Here it is. You have questions. Let's read it. He couldn't retain it that way. So what I had to do was then I had to be able to learn to be able to do that. And I did the video and then showed him, okay, let's do that. So he visualized it, saw me doing it, and was able to learn that way. Now, he went over time. He ended up being a little bit better. A little bit better, got a little better over time. But then it was a force for me to change and say, okay, how does this person learn? When I can't, I learned from, I learned going in the dojo, but I was given worksheets and I was given the, the printouts saying, here it is, just because I learned that way. And by the way, I was forced to. I didn't have any, we didn't have YouTube then. Barely had the internet, barely had the internet and had Boulder.
I mean, Mark didn't have electricity then.
We were giving out smoke signals back in the day.
I was going to say, was it passed down story to story over the campfire?
That's right. All verbal.
Yeah.
And the moon.
So, the other thing I think that I want to touch on a little bit is the recovery part, where for an injury that you're still able to go to the dojo. Maybe it's a rotator cuff, right? Maybe so. For the last, I hurt my ankle in August. It's now January. I have been given, my doctor said I'm okay to walk on it. I just have to baby it a little bit and be careful about the ways I twist it. So, I have been using my leg, my ankle. The hope was that it would strengthen itself with the physical therapy that I was going through, and it wasn't enough. And there's a bone that's been misaligned, whatever. But I have been going to class, but I have had to modify stuff for myself. And I think that's an important discussion that has to happen with, if you are the person that has this injury, that you have with your instructor. So I let my instructor know, this is the issue with my right ankle. It's easy to see because my right ankle is twice the size of my left. So obviously there's an issue there, right? But I told them, like, these are my limits. Like, I can't do super deep stances because my ankle doesn't allow that bend to happen. I can't do a lot of twisting on it. So when I'm pivoting around, I've got to do 2 or 3 shuffle steps, right? So, but I'm still doing it.
Yes.
That's the thing. I'm still going to class.
Right.
And he has even told me, if you need to just sit down in the middle of class, that's fine. Just, no, not a big deal. You don't have to even say anything to me. Just go sit down. But I think, as an instructor, we need to hear those things.
Yep.
Right? Mark, do you have any thoughts?
It's on both ends. We need to hear them. If a student is injured, we need to know what's going on in their life. Definitely. I mean, if I'm out there and somebody's not moving properly and they say, "Oh, I'm fine," and I let them go and they injure themselves more, never a good thing. At the same time, we always have to keep our eyes open. When we see these things, we have to say, "Hey, are you okay?" One thing I have noticed in many schools, my school in particular, is that the students in the adult classes tend to fall in line with the instructor, age-wise, that way. So a lot of my students are over 60. So I have to keep an eye on them a little more because many have injuries that they keep. So communication, as Andrew was saying, is key. If you don't tell your instructor that you have an injury of any type, it's going to get worse. But if he knows, he might be able to say, "Hey, try it this way, or try this way, or don't do this, or try this."
Yeah.
I agree with what Mark's saying 100%. And I mean, I take it a little step further with everybody. I have in my school, I have the honesty pledge. And I told them, like, right off day one, 100% honesty, 100% of the time. I don't care if it hurts my feelings a little bit. It really doesn't, but it's just, if you tell me what's going on, I can work with that. And with somebody having injuries, like I've had students over the years who have had plenty of them, I've said the same thing. If something's up, tell me. I can't do anything unless you tell me what's up. And then we work on that as long as you're trying, it's good. But on the other side of it, with my current situation right now with a couple of students, it's also been very interesting because I've had the students now where it's like, okay, I can't do that, but I've also taken the opportunity kind of selfishly to force them to look at their own stuff. So if I'm doing an outward block like this and I just can't move it a little bit further, I'm forcing myself to go slow, and then they're forcing themselves to go at my speed. So then I can look at their accuracy and do this a little differently. But, as we all, I don't have a lot of students right now, so it's pretty easy to mend that. But if you do have it, it's just simply being honest. But also on the instructor side, being super honest with this, saying, yes, you do have this injury right now, and then celebrating that, that you're trying, that celebrating the trying, and then trying the best you can to just, accommodate, but say, how's the standard, what's going on, and check in as much as possible.
Yep. The last thing I would say is, if, depending on what your injury is, if you feel comfortable, I also think there's something, if you are a higher ranked student or an assistant instructor in your school. So I do I have done a fair bit of teaching in the schools that I have been a part of. And if the lower ranked students don't know that I have an injury and they see me doing something this way because I'm modifying, well, I'm going to pick forms for an example, or like kicks right now. I can't do any impact with that ankle. And you would think, well, okay, well, I can kick with the other leg, but I can't, my other leg that's hurt, I can't really support it while I'm kicking, right? so I'm not really doing much kicking. But forms, if a lower rank sees me doing my forms right now and thinks, oh, that's the way it's supposed to look,
Right.
they're going to be wrong. So I think having a discussion with your instructor, and if you feel comfortable, the instructor can let the other students know, hey, everybody, just Andrew's right ankle is bothering him. Again, in my case, it's easy to tell because you just look at it. But he's modifying a bunch of stuff, so just be aware. There's nothing wrong with that, and can help to alleviate issues in the future. Sure. So just something else. Again, it's all about that open communication.
Well, I'm going to take that one a step further.
Great.
I'm a couple of years older than you guys. And usually, a lot of times, it's like, Tashi Tim, come out here and demonstrate the way this is supposed to properly look.
Sure.
Because I have scoliosis, issues with the back, issues with my knee. And to do some of the Kung Fu stances, I'm able to do them. But to make them look the way I want them to look, he's going to do it. He's 28. Yeah. So he's got that benefit. So
I was thinking more in terms of, what if Tashi Tim hurt his foot and the younger ranks start looking at him on his modified one? I was thinking more along those lines. But that is a great point, that if you can't demonstrate something, there's nothing wrong with asking someone else to. So is there anything that we've missed in regards to this topic of being injured and still training or recovering from injuries?
I would really say one other thing is, to whatever the injury is was that open communication was a good thing, but really make sure that, if you go see a health professional, to make sure that advice is adhered to, and, but let them know what's going on as well. No, I am still going to the dojo, but here's the plan. So that way everybody's in the loop.
Yep. Yep. I would agree. Anything else, Mark?
I think we covered it all. Pretty much. We get a really, really, really good thing there.
Awesome.
And, only one thing. When you're 17, don't do anything silly. It'll come back and bite you when you hit 50.
That's true.
Like jump out of a treehouse.
That's right.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me, and then for all of you listening, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being a listener. Obviously at the beginning of the episode, I talked about all of the stuff we do. The one thing I didn't mention that I wanted to make time to say right now, one of the biggest and best things you can do for us, leave a review on Apple Podcast or give us a rating on Spotify. I'm not even going to tell you have to rate us 5 stars. I'd like you to, but that hugely helps us, the Patreon thing. But the other thing is, maybe there's an episode you listen to, maybe this one, maybe a different one, that you think a friend will like. Send it to them. Help us spread the word. Help us connect, educate, and entertain traditional martial artists of the world. It really means a lot to us, and it helps us in our goal to get everyone in the world to train for 6 months. Every little bit helps. So, Mark and Nick, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, it's great to be here as always.
And we're going to try this all together. Ready? Until next time, train hard, smile, and have a great day.
Great day.
High five.